adjectives? Swabat.
Swabat.
Students will.
Students will
Be able to.
be able to
Determine the
determine
perimeter of a polygon.
the perimeter of a polygon.
How can you find the distance around a polygon? Think about this question during the lesson.
A little bit loud.
Yes.
The city wants to build a new fence around the rose garden in the town square. What word describes the distance around the rose garden?
What's that word that we're talking about, Hope? Perimeter. Thank you.
Perimeter is the distance around the outside of any polygon. What type of measuring device would you use to measure the perimeter of an object?
What type of measuring device? What do you think, Alex? A ruler. Depends on the size, right? So if it was something on a piece of paper in front of you, I'd say use your ruler. But look here, they're saying meters. This is a big area. What else could you use, Ethan? That's for when we're finding area. That's tomorrow's lesson, okay? Today we're not talking about the inside of the figure, Ethan. We're only talking about the distance around the outside. We'll see what they say here.
Some appropriate devices to use for measuring perimeter are a ruler, tape measure, and a yardstick.
Or a meter stick in this case.
Which dimension are you measuring to find perimeter?
Which dimension? You know what they mean by that? What do you think they mean, Bella? 2-dimension? 2D, that's it. Like when you think of dimension, there's 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional figures. We'll see what they say here.
You are measuring length when you find perimeter.
So when they're referring to dimension, they were just referring to length, width, height, and in this case, we're just measuring the dimension of length.
Name a real-world example of when you would need to determine the perimeter of an object.
Okay, let's talk about some real-world examples here. Ian? Okay, what about a house? Why would you need to know the perimeter? For what part of a house? Okay. What about Corinne?
The backyard and how big like the house is gonna be and how big the rooms are gonna be.
Okay. What else, Ethan?
If you're gonna build this house, you kinda need to like know what the perimeter, what like the driveway you're gonna set the house at.
Okay. Oh.
To measure the perimeter of like the distance when you're building like some type of greenhouse.
Okay, what if I wanted to put a fence around my yard to keep my dog in? Would it be helpful to know the perimeter? Sure it would, yeah.
Determine the perimeter of your room when you need to know how much wallpaper border to get.
Wallpaper border for a room. There's another real world example.
Find the perimeter of the rose garden to find the total length of the new fence needed.
Okay, so once again to find the perimeter, we're just going to add up the sides here. I see 3 5s though, so a real quick way to do that would be to think in your head, 5 times 3 is 15, and then add on 4 plus 3 is 7, so what's 15 plus 7? 22 meters.
Perimeter is equal to the sum of the side lengths of a polygon. What strategy can you use so you include all the sides of a polygon without missing any sides or counting a side twice?
I know what I would do. What would you do, Grant? Make sure you didn't double count something. maybe make a number sentence of some kind and cross them out as you put them into your number sentence. That way you're not double counting anything. Let's see what they say here.
Make a dot on one corner and then trace the figure until you get back to the dot.
Not what I was thinking, but alright.
What is another way to describe the perimeter of an object?
Tell me again, Claire, when we're talking about perimeter, what are we talking about? Is it the area of the inside or the distance around the outside? Says distance.
The distance around an object is another way to describe the perimeter.
Okay, so here's a little formula for you. P equals, and then it gives you a number sentence like we were talking about a few slides ago.
You can determine the perimeter by adding the lengths of the sides. Why is it important to include the unit of measurement?
What? What do you think, Devin?
Because if you get like the wrong measurement and you're using like inches, you might get a smaller fence than
Oh,
you
yeah.
needed.
It's gonna affect the outcome by affecting the size of what you need. You know, if you're ordering fencing materials and you tell them, I only need 22 feet, and you don't put meters, if you put feet instead of meters, are you gonna get more or less? You're gonna get a lot less than what you really need.
You'll have to pay a lot if you want to.
It is important to include the unit of measurement because you need to know what the number stands for. 22 meters is different than 22 inches.
Definitely.
The perimeter of the rose garden is 22 meters. You can also determine the perimeter using multiplication. Since the longest side lengths are the same, multiplication can be used in the equation.
Just what we talked about earlier, right?
How do you know to first multiply 3 times 5 in the second equation?
Remember where that came from, Claire? This Claire back here? Where do we get 3 times 5 from?
Because we added 5 3 times.
Yeah, we have 3 5s, so we can get there quicker by just saying 3 times 5.
The order of operations indicates you should do the problem in the parentheses first.
We'll talk about order of operations a lot more later in 5th grade, but just for now, know anytime as a mathematician that you see something in parentheses, that is a signal that you always do the operations in parentheses first before you do anything else.
What is the purpose of the city knowing the perimeter of the rose garden?
Hey Butch, why is it important to know the perimeter? Why would the city need to know that?
Because when they're putting up a fence, if they get the wrong perimeter, they will either have more than they need or less.
Great answer.
If the perimeter is known, the city can determine how much fencing material to purchase to build the fence about the rose garden. Now you know how to determine the perimeter of a polygon using addition and multiplication.
Or do you really know it? Let's find out. So you either need a sticky note or a little piece of paper. Let's see where you're at with this.